Hello, welcome to Small Group. In church we are currently engaged in a series called Law and Gospel. Law and Gospel. The title of this week's sermon was The Jesus Method. And we spent the sermon explaining what I mean by that term. To summarize, this is John chapter 5, right after Jesus healed the man who was lame, who was crippled for 38 years, there at the pool of Bethesda. Now, after he healed this man, Jesus was criticized, persecuted by the religious leaders, the Jewish leaders, because first of all they said he'd healed on the Sabbath. But then secondly, when he explained to them his method of ministry, they wanted to kill him because they said he was making himself equal with God. So we find out that the method of ministry that Jesus employed, that God the Father had given him, was different from the method of ministry and serving God in the Old Testament. So more specifically, we learn certain things in this passage. First of all, that Jesus, he wasn't bound by tradition, that he healed out of compassion even before this man had repented of his sins. But most importantly, and I'm actually reading from John 5, chapter 17, when they said, well, for this reason the Jewish leaders were persecuting Jesus because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered and said, well, my Father is working until now, and I myself am working. And then verse 18, for this cause therefore the Jewish leaders were seeking all the more to kill him, because he not only was breaking the Sabbath, but also was calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. So Jesus gives a very important answer. He says, truly, truly, I say to you, the Son can do nothing of himself unless it is something that he sees the Father doing. For whatever the Father does, these things the Son also does in like manner. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all things that he himself is doing. And greater works than these will he do, show him, so that you may marvel. So we learn from this sort of the bottom line of this message. Man's method is to do for God. Religious traditions, institutional kinds of regulations. Man's method is to do for God. Works, the works of the law, the Old Testament law. The Jesus method is to do with God. To minister together with God, like we just read. That the Son does nothing unless he sees the Father doing it, and they kind of work together. The Father is working and I'm working. And that's important for us because we're a church. The believers in Jesus are supposed to be the body of Christ on earth, and so we should be doing the same thing. We should have that as our understanding of the way that we should. That Jesus method should be our method. And also, bottom line too, is that we should always be motivated, as Jesus says he is right here, by the love of the Father. So that's the message. Have a great small group, and we will see you next Sunday.